If you are like me and love finding players with really solid potential in somewhat less fancied footballing nations, then you're going to love what I have in store for you today. Feels like I say this virtually every season now, and maybe that's because I do, and that's really a very good thing. But once again, we do have a Hungarian side in yet another European final today. So we do, or will be doing that over on stream right about now before we get stuck into some transfers. So head over there to catch up on all that action after you've watched this video. The VODs of all the streams can, of course, be found on the second channel, which is linked in the description. They go out the day after each stream. But for now, season 20, it's hard to believe I'm actually saying that, of Building a Nation with MTK Budapest was supposed to be the beginning of the rest of the save, in the sense that we now hoped that we would always have 7 teams in various European competitions pretty much exclusively for the rest of the save. We'd given ourselves a nice little cushion down to 5th place France, so our attention this year were very much on trying to get back ahead of Spain and back into 2nd spot in the coefficients, while still worrying a little bit about 4th place Germany catching us up. But the main thing is we'd hopefully remain in the top 4. But before we get into anything else, there is the little matter of those 2 European finals that we had last year. So let's talk about that quickly. And we'll start with us, and it's pain. It is utter pain. This might look like one of those games when you're just like, I don't really think I have anything to complain about. And you're absolutely right. I don't. In the grand scheme of things, we really don't. Bayern deserve to win, as you can see from the statistics. It's just the way that this game panned out. It should never have been that way. Unfortunately, the XG graphs and stuff are a little bit out of date, so it doesn't really tell the full story, because then, in the 72nd minute, Brandon Silva decided to do the stupidest thing of his career, and he's done several stupid things. Coming along behind a random fullback, we're 1-0 up, cruising, in total control of the game. Bayern had barely done anything. I don't think they'd had a shot in the whole second half up to this point. And then Brandon Silva decides to just randomly scissor kick someone, gets himself sent off when we're winning. Utterly unforgivable. And of course, as a result of that, we work down to 10 men. Mbala gets them the goal in the 80th minute to equalise, and then in the 95th minute of 93 minutes, which was just fantastic, Dylan Delhay scores the winning goal and Bayern win the Champions League. I was livid with Brandon Silva for this. We had actually considered selling him because of that kind of just shocking display of, literally, he cost us a Champions League right there. I see there's no way that we wouldn't have won this game if he doesn't get sent off. But more on that in a little bit, because of course there was also Kajvada in the other European final, in the Europa League final against Manchester City, who somehow ended up in the Europa League. We didn't exactly have a lot of hope, but I'm going to sum up the entire final in one clip.
Sarmiento again. Tell you what, the keeper's left a bit of space there. Sarmiento! Sosa on the rebound! Kajvada 1, Manchester City 0, and unbelievably, with 2 minutes to go in the Europa League final, they lead. Unbelievable. Sarmiento's free kick hits the post, Sosa on the rebound, and with 2 minutes to go, can they do that? Imagine.
Yeah. The absolute mugging of the century. There's just no two ways about it. Man City with the 24 shots, 11 on target. Ramirez had the worldie of a game, and we were just thinking, oh, they're going to take on extra time. It's going to be amazing. And then Jose Francisco Sosa, 89th minute winner, wins Kajvada the Europa League, and that's back-to-back Europa Leagues for Hungarian sides. I just couldn't even fathom it. Not to mention the fact that Kajvada then won the Super Cup against Bayern Munich, with Zoltan, our former youth player, scoring the winning goal. So things you love to see. Kajvada are in good shape. But that's enough of that excitement. We'll get back to some more excitement later, because as I said, there is another European final. The question is who? But for now, it is time to talk transfers, because as I said in the intro, we have found some gems potentially from some rather interesting nations, but also this season has just been one of absolutely outrageous bargains, the likes of which I don't think I've actually seen through this entire save. Maybe some players of equal star ratings from back in the day, but the point is, we're a Champions League winning side now. The fact that we're finding these types of players still is actually baffling to me, and I'm so happy. Maybe just got a bit lucky this season, but still. But first, let's start with some outs, because there have been a couple. First of which was Brandon Silva. So I told you we were a bit angry at him, and ironically, it actually wasn't that broke the camel's back on him. So he had 1 year left on his contract, and we knew that there was some interest in him from elsewhere. But then, in the Club World Cup, he also got a straight red card, this time for elbowing a player in the stomach. This man has got an attitude issue, which is weird that it's only presented itself as he's become like into his 30s now. Very, very strange. Not sure what's going on. Hope he's okay in his private life. But point is, we couldn't have a player that was continually doing that and costing us matches. So in the end, we sold him to Chelsea for 20 million. It wasn't that much money, honestly. We could have got more at the start of the window, but with 1 year left, we just felt he has to go. And the other transfer is one that we were a little bit more saddened by, but we did feel like it was the right time to move him on. Bobby Tree. He's given us 9 years of his life, 134 goals in the league for us in 168 games. But we again decided decided that we were probably going to get no more money for him than any other time right now. 31 years old, he had a year and a half left on his deal, and Real Madrid, right at the end of the January transfer window, offered us £106 million for him. And given that he'd actually fallen down the pecking order a little bit this season because of Blaz's performances, we decided that this might be the right time to move Bobby on and allow some of the youngsters to start to take up those spots in the squad. But now let's talk about some ins. First, we're going to discuss some of the big names, and then I'll show you some of the bargains and the obscure nation players. First up, an absolutely enormous outlay in Noe Gastão, who apparently his name means something to do with money in Portuguese. I actually forget what it was. £30.5 million. Now, obviously, some of that's in clauses. I believe it's 20 million up front, 10 million over like 3 years. Point being, we needed to start getting dug in to figuring out who the future of our defensive midfield was going to be after we inevitably eventually lost the likes of Velasquez and Yamin and didn't really have their direct replacements ready. So we figured that Noe would be the man for the job. He has now got a cap for Portugal. He's developing like a freight train this season. I'm not sure how a freight train develops, but I'm guessing fast and unruly. We also signed up Jeff Hendrick, except of course it isn't Jeff Hendrick, it's just Hendrick. The original, real, actual Hendrick. This isn't clickbait this time. We just call him Jeff Hendrick to annoy people that constantly want to see his profile. I just pretend that I can't find him in the database. But needless to say, we decided to bring him in finally. We paid him 82 grand for half a season and then cancelled his contract. Then we ploughed £9 million into Predrag Mitic, who's gone out on loan to Girmot, but I just really like those attributes. Then we dropped £4.8 million on Alejandro Pavone, and I think he's one of the next big things in world wingers, potentially. He's very, very good as it is. He's a pace merchant currently, great technical ability to begin with. I'm not seeing a lot of weaknesses in him either. We want to train him on that left-hand side, but he's been out on loan at Molfehovar for the second half of this season, and I really like this guy, and I think there's a bright future for this chap, and this is what we need to be continually bringing through. We also spent that same exact figure on Mateus Hillestad of Bodø. The Norwegian clubs have generated some fantastic talent over the last couple of years, and we finally got our next set of Norwegian scout reports through, and mother of Christ. He was just one of many that were scouting, but he's the first one we actually picked up. I think he's great. Hopefully we can get him a loan next season because he wasn't old enough when he joined us to go out on loan. I think he's great. And finally, onto our last big outlay, and this was Liam Cooper, £20 million from Celtic. He was a player that I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to drop 20 million on, honestly, but Chat convinced me in the end, and I think the main reason was we had him on the scout list for a long time. We'd constantly been scouting him, and he'd never dropped away from being 5-star potential on all of these scouting reports, and that's usually something that does happen. So it kind of convinced me to take the plunge, get him in. £20 million. I do think he is probably our future starting goalkeeper, already a Scottish international. I just think he's a really good keeper. I promised that we had some obscura types of players and some absolute bargains. So let's get into those guys now, because this is where we have just killed it this year. It starts with Theomoko Asoko, and it only gets better from here, if that's even possible to say. £130,000 from Joliba. Now, what I did basically in the middle of, I think it must have been early last summer, was I just had a little look through some of the various national teams to see if I could find any players that looked a bit too young almost to be in their national teams, which usually is a hint that there's a solid player there. And some of the players we found this year were just next level. This guy here is ridiculous. Look at the attributes he's got at only 19. 10 caps for Mali. He is now considered a wonder kid as well. His progress out on loan at Molfehovar this season has been fabulous. Next up on the list is Rajesh Diaz, who I've just noticed has decided to become Spanish again, which is a little bit So basically, we found an Indian player that was playing for Sevilla, and he was actually really good, as you can see. Born in Bengaluru, and now he's decided to declare for Spain, which is a bit strange, honestly, because I don't think he's quite good enough to get in the Spanish squad, but he could absolutely kill it for the Indian national team. And for 155 grand on a release fee, happy with that. And now another, Abdullah Ibe, 800 grand from Rivers United in Nigeria. One cap for Nigeria now, of course. A DM is out on loan in the second tier at Spartacus, but again, fantastic player for a little bit more money, I would say. But I still think with the potential ceiling that it looks like he has, and it just gets better. Abdurrahmane Mendes, £450,000 from a side in the Portuguese third division. Good on both feet. Look at the, I mean, obviously his potential could fluctuate, but it's not moved off of that since we found him. It's absolutely outrageous. He's on loan at Holmved in the second tier, but they're looking likely to get promoted, and I think that their squad has a lot of players that could absolutely kill it in the future if we can just keep them out there. I think they could be the next Halalash, personally. They really do have an insanely stacked team of young talent that is only getting better by the year, and it's so exciting. Doesn't stop there, though. Ibrahima Konate, Async Mimosas. Async Mimosas obviously is not particularly obscure in many ways, but still, they don't, I often look at them and I never find the players I'm really looking for until this chappie here comes along. £230,000. He's also gone on loan to Honved. 2 caps for the Ivory Coast already at the age of 18. I'm just in love with these players. They are so good. Then less of an obscurity, but more of a bargain. This is Wilson Roberto. He's a 19-year-old guy that I bought from Barca for £5.5 million. I don't know how they let him have a release clause of £5.5 million, but we triggered it. He was happy to join us. He's now already got a Brazil cap while playing for Budapest. He is genuinely ridiculously good, and for that price, it reminds me a lot of, I think his name was Aaron Scholl. He was a guy I got from Leipzig really cheap on the last save we did, and he ended up becoming an absolute worldie. And now for possibly two of my favourites of the slightly more obscure nations players, because it's just, I've never really had many players from these nations at all in my saves, and it's just dope. The first of whom was Vardan Manouchian, an Armenian centre-back that was playing for Alashkert, and now we've taken to calling him the Manouchian candidate because he's just fantastically good, and he always follows orders too. 6 foot tall, solid jumping reach, reasonably great physicals, 17 tackling, marking of 14, 11 heading, certainly going to be the star of the Armenian national team for many, many years, and now a helicopter is flying over. I assume that's because I mentioned the Manouchian candidate, right? And for £115,000, just an absolute bargain yet again. But there's one more, and this is he. This is Georgi Kigaradze, who's joined us from Dila Gori in Georgia. Now, obviously, I was just scouting in bulk some of these players that were in their national teams, but when we saw him drop into the scouting inbox, and we just basically didn't assume that the 5 stars was actually going to last, and when he joined us, it actually had dropped down a little bit, but it has now returned after some more, I guess, investigation. £160,000 for him. He can play on both sides. He's got solid left foot, strong right foot. He's fast. He has solid tent poles for the role. His composure's improving dramatically. He's got 2 caps for Georgia already. It's lovely finding players like this. It's dope. He's basically the next Kvaradona, except maybe actually his dribbling's pretty good as well. Solid agility to go with it. I really do think he's amazing. For me, a wonder kid is great and all if they're Brazilian and it's fantastic and they're going to be great. But if I find a Georgian wonder kid, it's just way more satisfying to me. So Georgie, be that man. And in the league this year, well, things still were quite tight. Despite us going on nearly an unbeaten season, we lost the final game of the year to Haladash, and we weren't trying to lose it. We played a slightly different system that had actually worked quite well for us in some other games and just got very unlucky, basically. It's just really frustrating to go lose the unbeaten season on the final day. But look at Haladash, 79 points now, which might actually be a record for a second place side. I don't know if they've got 80 before. I'll have to have a little look. Pushkash goes straight back down again, and they are just dead to me at this point. I just can't help them anymore. As for the second tier, there you go. Jury coming up. Honvid coming with them with their 85 points. It'd be nice to see them back up. I want to see them stay up this time around. You'll also note that the reputation of the second tier is now kind of on par with sort of Serie B. There's Weite Bundesliga, La Liga, Smart Bank as well. So it's around about the same level as a lot of the second tiers in the big leagues too, which is nice to see. But now we turn our attention to our own exploits in Europe this season, because this has been a strange one. Worth knowing as well that we did also win the Club World Cup for once, which was just kind of nice, honestly, with a 6-4 victory over Liverpool in the final, which was just mental. Started off well, though, in the Champions League. A 3-0 victory against Manchester United, absolutely clapped them. Easy. Blaz with a couple of goals, one for Mario Mihal. Then it was a similar story away to Dinamo Zagreb. Velasquez, Baumeister, Blaz again, and Mario Mihal with yet another goal. 2 wins, 2 games. And then it just got even better with a 7-0 thumping of a really solid Benfica side. Blaz scored 5 goals in this match, doing exactly what he did last season too. Velasquez and Patrice grabbing more goals. But, I mean, that was what, 3 wins, 3 games, no goals conceded, and like 15 scored. And then honestly, we had a slightly fortunate victory away at FC Copenhagen, but kept the sort of clean sheet record intact there. Baumeister and Bigmanovic with the goals. We were definitely the better side, but they did have a couple of interesting chances, and maybe even a 1-goal win would have been more fair, but I think we still deserve to win. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go to plan against Manchester City away from home in the next game. I still think we were the better side, but Matondo and Phil Neville with the goals that just sunk us. It was a real shame. Honestly, it kind of bounced back in the next game as we actually beat Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Nunez and Bobby Tree with the goals. Spurs were really good in this game. Had a penalty in there too, missed a good chance. They probably should have won this match, so I guess swings and roundabouts balances it out. Luckily though, Club Brugge came along and took their routine beating really. 7-0, Bobby, Baumeister, Blaz with a hattie, 2 more for Nunez, who's had a great season too, to hammer them into the ground as well with a 7-0 thumping. We'd actually only conceded 2 goals and had kept clean sheets in every other match. And then lastly, a fairly straightforward game against Atletico, but they did still get 2 goals late on in this one. Nunez with a goal, 2 for Bobby, 1 for Blaz, 4-2 victory there as well. So 7 wins out of 8, and that left us in a great spot with 21 points on the board, winning it easily, 29 goals scored as well, only 4 conceded, just cruising through to the next round very, very comfortably. But now we got to look down to the other Hungarian sides. You'll note Haladash came 10th in the Champions League. 4 wins and only 1 defeat in the entirety of the Champions League group, which annoyingly came in their final game, which was against Manchester City. And even that was very close to not being a defeat. They were 1-1 in that game at the Etihad, and then they screwed it up in the final seconds. And I think that had they actually got that point, it might well have been, it would have been enough. If they got that point, they would have come 8th in the Champions League and qualified in the top 8, which is just outrageous. But look at the teams they got wins against as well. Valencia, Celtic, FC Copenhagen, Shakhtar, but the draws as well. Man United, Atletico, and Juventus. just ridiculously good performances. They are a genuine contender now. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said at the bottom here with Kisvárda and Ferencváros. It looked okay for them at several points, but they just couldn't quite get it over the line, sadly. Ferencváros with 7 points in the end, did get a victory against Panathinaikos, some draws against Monaco, Shakhtar, Man City, and FC Copenhagen, but it was the biggest problem was the defeat to Valencia for me. That was the one that really sunk them. And Kisvárda did actually manage to beat Chelsea by 3-0, ridiculously, but got some draws in there too against Juventus, Napoli, and Sevilla. The biggest issue for them, though, was dropping points late on against Napoli and Sevilla. Basically, that was the biggest issue. Those dropped points, and also losing at home to Celtic really did cost them. But we're still getting somewhere. They weren't getting like hammered to the very bottom with the 0 points or 3. You know, they got 5 and 7 respectively. It's not the end of the world. Sorry, 6 and 7. It's better. Because our reward for getting through to the next round was actually to play Atletico for the second time in a row. And it didn't go much better for them than the game we'd played less than 2 months prior to that, as Ingram, a Santa Maria own goal, and Bigmanovic sunk them into the ground for a 3-0 away victory, very cushy. Which only got even worse in the home leg as we put 7 goals past them. I believe it was 7-0 before they even started scoring. We were, I think, 10-0 up on aggregate before they even got going. And we would face Man City in the next round and a chance to exact some revenge. And boy, did we. Played a slightly different system, went for the Shadow Striker Fortress style system with no striker, and it worked fantastically. We were very good at the Etihad. Duran with the penalty. Baumeister and Ingram sunk them 3-0. Very cushy, looking great. But we made no mistake in the second leg as well. Bigmanovic and Blas Duran with the goals. Maybe a little bit fortunate to win this one, but I think on the tie, we were definitely the better side and deserved to go through fairly comfortably. 5-0's a bit harsh, but we were definitely the best team. And that drew us against Real Madrid, a team that we've got a reasonably good record against lately. We felt we had a good chance. Didn't go so well, though, in Madrid, unfortunately. Tavernier, a player I actually tried to sign a couple of years ago, got a late one for them in the 73rd minute. We thought, you know what, a 1-0 defeat's not the end of the world. We were playing okay. It was a very even game. Sometimes they just don't go your way. But then a goal from a corner through Mustafa Hadji was a bit annoying, because suddenly a 2-0 deficit is a real hole to dig yourself out of. But honestly, with the way that we can perform at home, I still felt that we had a chance to get through. And, well, we performed at home, and we still lost 2-0. Basically, we just dominated them in the way that we were hoping to at home, created plenty of chances, missed so many one-on-ones, it's just not even fair talking about it. It's crazy. The goalkeeper had a bloody excellent day, was saving stuff that you just wouldn't normally see saved, and then unfortunately, basically, we let Kemper run all the way through our defence towards the goalkeeper. Nobody tried to track him at all. They just left him, and then he just slots it past the keeper. It doesn't even move. Real shame there. And then the second one, the ball deflects off of like 3 people into his path, and then it just dribbles into the goal. Just one of those games where you just don't feel like you're ever going to have a chance to win. So we do lose the tie 4-0, which is just baffling to me, but that's football, right? But now let's talk Haladáš, as they drew Dortmund in the next round. Unfortunately, the first leg didn't really go to plan, as Frankowski and Capolino made it 2-0 to Dortmund, who'd not had a good season, honestly. Haladáš got themselves a pretty solid draw. Dortmund are not that good. I think they came like 17th in the group. I can't remember exactly. As in the second leg, they lost 4-2 at home as well. Dortmund just pulled it out the fire right when it was needed, unfortunately. 2 goals for Zivkovic wasn't enough, as Haladáš do drop out. It's nice to see them get there, though, and I do think in the future, if they get a bit of luck with the draws, they're a team that I can see comfortably qualifying top 16 every year, and maybe even challenging for top 8. If they keep the way they're going, I think they're the sort of team that could maybe make a run at a Champions League one day, and that excites me to no end. And honestly, things were looking pretty good there too. We had Debrecen and Kecskmet in the Europa League, 13th and 15th, but that's still top half, which is decent. 4 wins for them against these sort of sides in there. A few defeats thrown in too, but they were playing against Roma, Newcastle, you know, reasonably good sides, let's be honest. And the same sort of story for Kecskmet with defeats against Schalke and Lyon, but it did get them through to the next round, and things got off to an okay start. A 2-2 draw for Kecskmet away at Legia gave them a chance in the second leg, but unfortunately Debrecen drew against Lille, not an easy tie at all, and went 3-1 in the first leg. Now, Debrecen have pulled off miracles in the past. We've seen it happen. But a 2-goal deficit going back home was always going to be tough. And sadly, it proved that way. They did get the result in the end and win on the night, but they went out by 4-3 on aggregate. A real shame. But Kecskmet followed up with another 2-2 draw. Kevin Griffiths scoring again, did manage to progress through to the next round of the Europa League, beating Legia Warsaw. So nice to see them at least progress. Unfortunately, though, they were handed a tie against Athletic Club in the next round. Not easy. And it proved to be exactly that, as they went down 2-1 at home at Alexanko with the goals. Manier got one back for them, but it wasn't enough. And the second leg proved to be just as bad. A 3-1 victory for Athletic Club wasn't really going to be. Kecskmet did pretty well to reach the round of 16. We just didn't quite have the teams we wanted in the Europa this year, really. We wanted like a Ferencváros in there, or an Újpest, or someone that's got a bit more chops, honestly. And that brings us to Újpest, who were the sole competitor of ours in the Conference League, and actually didn't really cover themselves in glory, honestly. Came 10th in the group, which is pretty bad for one of our sides in this league at this point. They got 3 victories in there too, but the 3 draws against PAOK, Besiktas, and Grasshopper Zurich, who were, albeit solid teams, I think they could have done better, honestly. They just didn't really score enough goals. Only 6 goals scored, but it was enough to get them through. Had to play an extra game, though. They drew Utrecht and started very well. 2-0 victory away from from home. Fruta, Mr. Fruit Pastels himself, did the business. It was just as straightforward in the home leg. 2-1 victory, 4-1 on aggregate, easy. But that led to them drawing Midtjylland, a team that we've had quite a lot of run-ins with in the past. And, well, would you believe it? 1-0 victory. Petku in the 92nd minute gave them the win that was very, very important, as it quite literally won them the tie, as they got a 1-1 draw in Denmark with Hughes grabbing a goal, and they pushed themselves through to the quarterfinals. Things you love to see. A quarterfinal which will see them face off against Olympiacos, knowing full well that if they got past Olympiacos, they'd be into a semi-final against either Basel or Crvena Zvezda, which gave them a great pathway. Didn't start so well, though, with a 0-0 draw against Olympiacos. Second leg, though, was much better, as Mr. Fruit Pastels does it yet again, and they push themselves through to another semi-final in the Conference League, and they would face off against Basel. Unfortunately, that went even worse, as in the first leg, a 2-1 defeat, Fruta yet again scoring for them just to keep them in the tie, and in the second leg, incredibly, they did it again. Went to extra time against the Fruta scoring, Etienne with one as well as Isad, and they've done it. They've gone to another Europa Conference League final. They will play Aston Villa, who of course won the group stage, in that final. They'll obviously be the favourites, but this is now the 7th time in this save that a Hungarian side has played in the Conference League final. I think we've had 5 different teams in 7 different finals of this, and they've lost all 6 up to this date, and I still think they're going to lose a 7th, but surely at some point one of them will be able to win the Conference League. It's mad that it's still not happened yet. Maybe this is the year that Budapest finally break that curse. Who knows? What that means for us on the coefficients is, you know what, it's been a solid year. We're sitting 4th on the coefficients on the year, 17.1. We could go back above Germany on the year were the right results to happen in the Budapest game and nothing else goes silly anywhere else. That's provided Bayern lose the final, basically, of the Champions League as well. That would allow us to go back into 3rd for the year. Not that it means a great deal, as we're already probably going to be finishing above them anyway, so there's not really a big problem there. As for the overall coefficients, though, as you can see, we're likely to finish above Germany, stay in 3rd spot. Spain have had a really solid year, and that's been a real problem. Not much we can really do about it, as the gap to England sort of stays where it is, and if anything, grows slightly, sadly. But 17.143 is really good in our first season back with 7 teams. The last time we went to our first season with 7 teams, we only got like 13 points, which is, I believe, the season we actually just lost as it goes. So the next couple of years, we're still going to be losing these kind of years, but I feel like we've got a chance to grow into it a little bit more, as we did last time. The difference is this time, though, you'll see that the gap down to 5th place France, we're 12 points ahead of them at the moment, and it gets even worse back to Italy, where we're 17 points clear currently. I think there's very little chance of us dropping out of the top 4 or 5, which will guarantee us those extra Champions League spots, and we should be able to get the money coming in and the reputation of the club's building, which I think is where we should be able to establish ourselves to try to make that push. Youth intake, really not even worth talking about again. Absolutely no one worth it in it, because that's just our youth intakes these days, sadly. As for the stats, well, Blazdurin does it again. 44 goals. Now, honestly, I thought he was going to have more this year. He actually dropped off quite a lot towards the end of the season, and we played a few sort of different tactics, which kind of just messed with him a little bit potentially as well, once we were out of the Champions League. But still, 44 goals, 9 assists, 53 goal contributions in only 37 appearances as well. That's the thing. He is just on a different level now, and he's still only 24. I think he's probably going to be our main striker now for the next 6 or 7 years. Perhaps not the entire rest of the save if someone else comes through. Also, Marcelo Nunez, 26 goals this season for him. He basically played the Ingram role more than Ingram did this year. Ingram was often deputising slightly deeper, so that's why he's not had the best of seasons with the only 8 goals and 7 assists. But I would have still expected a slightly more of a performance. Bigmanovic with 15 goals, Baumeister with 15, Van Dam as well with 14, doing a really good job as a backup striker this year. 14 goals is really respectable. As for assists, no one broke into the 20s this year, but Kenny with another 18. He's just a worldie, isn't he? Nicely Bigmanovic with 14 as well. He's really taken to that role out wide as well. Sarsenadis with 12 has been fantastic this season too. That's really surprised me, actually. Velasquez with 11 on top of that as well. But it's just nice to see that Kenny's just doing it again. And the only real additions that you might notice to the lineup this year is that Pretzel's played a little bit more. Now, he came back from his loan at Ferencváros and unfortunately wouldn't go back out again, so he found himself some space in the team, and I believe he's the only one. Oh, no, it's not like Łukasz Barteczko also came back from his loan at Giamot and has featured a decent amount this season as well. Minus 102 out on loan now, which is like, what, 26? There's 154 players out on loan is good news. Best scorer on that is, of course, Boyer with 39, but Bing Sword as well, or Beng Sword, he, for me, feels like one for the future. I'm very excited about him. Another guy that's at Honved, and you should see how many players we've got that are at Honved and doing very, very well. It's ridiculous. Look at some of the values on these loan players, and just to sort of illustrate the point I was on about, when you look at the players that are out on loan at Hallash, now obviously this fluctuates around a little bit, but you can see just how many of the top players are on loan there as well. But when you look at the potentials, you'll see that, Honved have got quite a lot of them. So does Giamot. There's a lot of these players are at those types of clubs, which gives me hope for the future. Finances, actually all right now. Ignore the FFP thing. That goes away after a little while. We've got all the sponsorship money's coming. Real Madrid also owe us another £50 million, so we've got that coming in as well. And not to mention, there's a whole host of players that we've already signed up that you're going to see obviously in next year's video, but there's a lot of good players joining us this summer that we've got ready to go as well. And hopefully we can find some more absolutely obscure gems over the next year, just because I find that fun. But the plan is simple. We just want to keep going with what we're doing, keep plugging away, hope that each year we can build on the previous year and start to really grind towards being really consistent in Europe. I want to continually see sides get into the European finals like we have had this year. I want to see some more Europa League stuff. I want to see teams going a bit deeper in the Champions League, but it feels like we're getting to a stage now where that's starting to become more and more possible, especially as they start getting Champions League money more and more regularly now. That's going to really help them sign their own players. They've got huge reputations as well, which is very, very helpful. Both Haladash and Kijvara now have continental rep at 4 stars, which is going to be massive for them for getting better players. So there we go. So that's what we're going to be doing over on stream. Got the final with Újpest versus Aston Villa. Please, for the first time, can we just win one of these damn things? And then more transfer goodness. We're going to have a lovely old time. So join us over there for that, if you will. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, drop a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I stream on Twitch right now, which you already know about. I have a lot of videos coming out for you before the end of the month. You have no idea. Let's just put it that way. I'll see you guys soon. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.